Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast, and let's get week 14 started with Mailbag Monday. Now, we've got a really interesting one here from Adrian C., who writes in, how many Nazgûl did Gandalf fight on Weathertop? Now, Adrian goes on to point out that some folks think that he fought all 9 there, and that's based on this line from the Council of Elrond. It was impossible to find you, Frodo, in the wilderness, and it would have been folly to try with all the 9 at my heels. I hope the Man of the West can shed some light on this. Well, Adrian, I'll do my best. First, let's take a look at that passage that some use to support the idea that Gandalf fought all 9 of the Nazgûl on Weathertop. During the Council of Elrond, Gandalf speaks of the fight with the Nazgûl. I galloped to Weathertop like a gale, and I reached it before sundown on my second day from Bree, and they were there before me. They drew away from me, for they felt the coming of my anger, and they dared not face it while the sun was in the sky. But they closed round at night, and I was besieged on the hilltop, in the old ring of Amon Sûl. I was hard put to it indeed. Such light and flame cannot have been seen on Weathertop since the war beacons of old. At sunrise, I escaped and fled towards the north. I could not hope to do more. It was impossible to find you, Frodo, in the wilderness, and it would have been folly to try with all the 9 at my heels. Okay, so Gandalf does explicitly mention all the 9 at my heels, but he doesn't explicitly say that all 9 were at his heels when he was on Weathertop. So let's take a look at some more text. Earlier in Gandalf's retelling of recent events, we read a few things that give us clues. But fear grew in me as I rode. Ever as I came north, I heard tidings of the riders. And though I gained on them day by day, they were ever before me. They had divided their forces, I learned. Some remained on the eastern borders, not far from the Greenway, and some invaded the Shire from the south. All right, so we know they split their forces. Later, after Gandalf has seen the aftermath of the attack at Crickhollow, we read him say, on the threshold there lay a cloak that had been Frodo's. Then, for a while, hope left me, and I did not wait to gather news, or I might have been comforted. But I rode on the trail of the riders. It was hard to follow, for it went many ways, and I was at a loss. But it seemed to me that 1 or 2 had ridden towards Bree, and that way I went. Later, so I stayed there that night, wondering much what had become of the riders, for only of 2 had there yet been any news in Bree, it seemed. But in the night we heard more. 5 at least came from the west, and they threw down the gates and passed through Bree like a howling wind. And then later Gandalf says, it seems clear to me that this is what happened. Their captain remained in secret away south of Bree, while 2 rode ahead through the village, and 4 more invaded the Shire. But when these were foiled in Bree and at Crickhollow, they returned to their captain with tidings, and so left the road unguarded for a while, except by their spies. The captain then sent some eastward straight across country, and he himself with the rest rode along the road in great wrath. So it's only after Gandalf explains all of this about the splitting of the forces and where they all go that we get the paragraph that we read earlier about the fight on Weathertop, followed by that line about all the 9 at my heels. But given the way the Witch King has split his forces, it seems highly unlikely they were all there at that time. I mean, really, the way he describes it, it would have been almost coincidental had they shown up all at the same time. But here's the thing, we don't have a clear answer from the text alone of The Lord of the Rings. Fortunately, that is not our only source. One of my go-to sources for all things The Lord of the Rings is Wayne Hammond and Christina Scull's The Lord of the Rings, A Reader's Companion. It's an entire book of annotations, provides insight throughout, and comes very highly recommended. It truly is one of my must-have volumes. Now, in that, they reference the manuscripts at Marquette, in this case, a document named The Hunt for the Ring. And no, this is not the version that you read in Unfinished Tales. Now, there in that manuscript, Tolkien explains a bit about how the Black Riders split up and what they did. 3 arrived at Bree on September 29th and learned about the presence of the ring. 1 of those goes south to where the Witch King had set up camp. We do learn in Unfinished Tales that that camp is at Andrath, where the Greenway passes in a narrow valley between the South Downs and the Barrow Downs. Now, that 1 sent to go south to give info to the Witch King is driven off by the Dunedain and doesn't get to the Witch King until the next day. The other 2 that remained in Bree are the ones Merry encounters there. Then there's the attack at Crickhollow at the same time that also fails. So you've got the 2 left in Bree. They head off to the Witch King to tell him that the ring bearer has left. Then we read in this note from the manuscript, the 3 from Crickhollow ride down the Buckland Gate and make also for Andrath. The Nazgûl are thus all assembled at Andrath. The Witch King is exceedingly wroth. But now they split forces again. Tolkien writes, the Witch King now plans his pursuit. He sends 4 riders across country from Andrath to Weathertop. He himself, with the other 4, scour all around the borders from Sarn Ford to Bree at speed, but can find out nothing or feel any trace of the ring. Once they realize the ring has gone east, Tolkien writes that they leave the Greenway and take East Road. Soon after midnight, they ride through Bree like a storm, casting down the gates. Okay, that gets us to where Gandalf left us earlier. But the manuscript continues later. Those 4 that the Witch King sent ahead come together near Weathertop. 1 remains there, while the other 3 keep going east on the road. Then, on October 3rd, Gandalf gets there. They sense him coming, that is. They get off the road, and then they close in behind. Now, the Witch King is confused at this point. Tolkien explains that he figured Gandalf must have gotten the ring. But now that he's here, he senses that Gandalf does not have it. So he wonders, and here I'll pick up the rest of that manuscript text. What is Gandalf pursuing? He himself must be after the escaping bearer, and it must therefore somehow have gone on far ahead. But Gandalf is a great power and enemy. He must be dealt with, and yet that needs great force. So those 5, the Witch King and the 4 with him, follow Gandalf to Weathertop. Then we read, Gandalf is attacked by the 5 plus the rider who had stayed near Weathertop on night 3-4. Frodo and Aragorn see the light of the battle in the sky from their camp. And there is your answer. The Witch King, his 4, plus the 1 of the original 4 that had stayed near Amon Sûl when the other 3 went forward, for a total of 6. Now, I hope that answers your question, Adrian. Sometimes in order to get a concrete answer, we have to look outside of the main text, but that's what we're here for. Now, folks, that does wrap it up for Mailbag Monday, but if you have a question you'd like me to answer, please email it to barliman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Let him know it's for today's Tolkien Times, and I'll get to it as soon as possible. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show and get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, a bonus weekly episode, and a lot more. Finally, join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Tolkien Tuesday as we learn more about the professor himself. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps, and follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.